This event is presented by the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism, School of Business, Stockton University, in partnership with the Greater Atlantic City Chamber.
Right, we are now live. We are beginning to collect attendees. So I'm just going to give everyone a few moments to load in.
Sarah, we had, last count, we had 80 register. I sent out the link again a couple minutes ago to the last few that registered this morning.
Excellent, excellent. So we are now at 13. And when the number sort of stabilizes, I'll go ahead and let everybody start.
And Dave, before we get started, my last Sixers game that I went to was my wife and I, our two kids. My son was 6. He's on my wife's shoulders at the end of the game. Sixers win. Josh Richardson's player of the game. He signed a ball and they throw it in the crowd. He turns from the opposite side of the court and points at us. I'm like, what's he doing with the ball? And he throws it in the air and I catch it. So I've got it in my son's room, a ball size. I couldn't believe it. He pointed at my son. I'm like, is he gonna throw a ball at my kid?
That's awesome.
Unbelievable. It's now, no matter what game we go to or what we do, any type of event, it's ruined because that was it.
Why didn't I get a ball at the end of this game?
Yeah, right. Why we're at an Eagles game? Why isn't he throwing me? Why isn't Carson Wentz throwing me a football?
I had the same experience when I was 6 or 7 years old. My grandfather was able to get us tickets up in like the nosebleeds of the old Spectrum, and a season ticket rep bounced past me a ball signed by Charles Barkley.
Wow.
And that created my love affair with the team. So, it's actually fitting for the conversation we're having today. We're all in the business of like creating special moments and creating special events. And it's so powerful how one connects. Your son will be a Sixers fan for life because of that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those little touch points that I think really matter.
Forever. It is. And there's nothing like it. My memory as a kid getting something at the Tropicana, we went to go watch wrestling and Sergeant Slaughter gave me his hat. And then years later, when I was at Boardwalk Hall, I met Sergeant Slaughter and I told him the story, how I was probably 8 years old and he's coming down the aisle and puts his USA hat on my head. And he said, that's what it's all about. He said, you're 8 years old, you're 40 years old now, you'll never forget that. So that's it.
Absolutely. So we are now at 31 attendees. I might just give everybody one more minute to load in before we get started. Hello and welcome. This is Getting Back Together, a panel discussion presented jointly by the Greater Atlantic City Chamber of Commerce and the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism. My name is Sarah Grady. I'm the Assistant Director for the Levinson Institute, and I am joined today by Michael Chait, Director of the Chamber, and he's going to be our moderator today. I'll invite him. As I said, I'll just give it one more minute for us to load in, and then he'll take over and help us introduce the rest of our lovely panelists, who I thank for their attendance today. For those attendees joining us, we will take questions at the end of the session, and I ask you kindly to use the Q&A button, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. We will collect questions throughout the session, so if you think of something, post it up there, and then we will answer it at the end. If you have any comments that you'd like to share amongst yourselves, please feel free to use the chat section. And if we see any questions that kind of pop in that we can really answer in the moment, we absolutely will. All right, so we are now at 36, and I will turn it over to Michael Chait as our moderator. And again, thank you, panelists, for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you to the Light Institute for partnering with the Greater Atlantic City Chamber on this event. I've spent close to 20 years in the live event industry in PR and marketing, spending almost 9 years at Boardwalk Hall in the Atlantic City Convention Center. I'm currently the director of the Atlantic City Air Show, the state's largest event that attracts typically 500,000 people to the area. And certainly we all have this desire and want and interest to get back together. And what does that look like now? What does it look like going forward? So we're very, very fortunate to be joined by an incredible panel today. I'm very grateful for everybody's time and volunteering their time to participate in this and to inform you of what it looks like now and what we anticipate it's going to look like going forward. We're joined today by Bill Hanson, who is the Vice President at Eiger Marketing Group and Tournament Director at the ShopRite LPGA. Ronnie Burt, who is the VP of Sales and Marketing at the Atlantic City Convention Center and historic Jim Whalen Boardwalk Hall. Dave Schaller, who is the Executive Vice President of Communications for the Philadelphia 76ers and the Harris Blitzer Sports and Entertainment Division. And also Phil Kenning, visiting Assistant Professor of Business Studies Marketing at Stockton University. So thank you everybody for joining us today on this very relevant and important topic as we start expanding capacities. So, starting off with a quick question really for Dave and Bill, who have been involved in live events now. What's it like to hear the crowd? What's it like to experience people and that environment now? Bill, you were just in Florida at a tournament, correct?
Yeah, I did. I was just down at the Chubb Classic, which is a Champions Tour event. And it was limited fans, but we probably had 1,000 or 2,000 fans out there. And it was my first event back to see fans. And I remember one instance. I'm kind of running around doing a ton of work. I don't see a lot of golf shots because I'm just, I'm working. I'm not watching the actual tournament. But on the 18th green, I was standing there and I just heard a huge roar. And it was loud enough for 1,000 people. And I was like, whoa, what the heck was that? And then I walked over, I was like, what just happened? Like, oh, this guy, John Harris, who's a player, he's like, he just chipped in. It was awesome. It was from out of the weeds and he hacked it up and it just rolled in and everybody went crazy. And it just it caught me by surprise, because I hadn't really heard it. And it was just great to hear. So it was nice. It was definitely cool to experience that again.
Yeah. Bill nailed it. And good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. We're in a spot now where we have 4,000 Sixers fans back at the Wells Fargo Center, soon to be around 5,000 in early May. And it just shows you the power of the home court advantage. The 76ers have had the best home court in the NBA over the last 3 to 4 seasons, and it's because of our fans. And one of the most interesting conversations I've had is with our players and how much they feed off of the energy. I think you all know the Philadelphia sports crowd will let you know how they feel, good, bad, or indifferent. And it's really fueled us and motivated us and inspired our players. And it's been really, really cool to see families back in our arena together again. You can see the emotion, you can see the warm feelings, and it's mattered. It's mattered to the success of our team, and I think it's mattered to jump-starting our society and our industry again.
Yeah, without question, it makes a huge difference. We all want and have a huge interest in getting back to whatever this new normal is and doing it in a safe and responsible manner, which you're doing now, And part of doing that and bringing people back to an environment is not just your communication with your customers, but your employees and your volunteers, in your case, Bill, with what you're doing. Ronnie, with Atlantic City Convention Center and Boardwalk Hall, and I know we're not open and doing events yet, but what are you doing from an employee perspective? And what are you communicating with them to let them know that when we are ready, you're going to be safe, we're going to be responsible, and because they're your brand ambassadors, they're your frontline staff.
Well, thank you and good morning. Thank you for the question, and Michael, thank you for having me participate on this panel. We've been actually in a unique situation because we have had the opportunity to stay in practice. And what I mean by that is the Atlantic City Convention Center has served as a field hospital. We are currently serving as a vaccine location and a testing location. So our team has had the opportunity to stay in practice. But here's what I would say relative to the question is, these have been very, very challenging times. And as leaders, it's how you lead during these challenging times. These are the times where you really build the trust. And one of the things that we've had to do is making sure that we're being empathetic and compassionate about what's happening in the environment globally, but more importantly in our community. Making sure that we're listening to our team, making sure that we are engaged and doing what it takes to pitch in. We've had to furlough a lot of people, and we've had to share responsibilities and pitch in. And I think that when you lead by example, when you lead by engagement, when you lead by showing compassion and empathy, and more importantly, display that you're relatable, I think that's how you build the confidence in your team. And that's what we've been doing and making sure that we are just transparent in the conversations. But then also there's a point in time where as a leader, what you have to do is you have to shift the focus to make sure everyone's keeping the big picture in mind, because we can get caught up in the moment and stay right there. And I think that those are the types of things that we're doing to make sure that our team stays engaged and we're ready for when that time comes back to bring, masses of people back together.
No, that's an excellent point. And from a leadership perspective, I think the event industry is one of those industries that's really unique. I mean, regardless of what department you work in an event industry, you're going to help move chairs. You're going to help set tables. You're going to be right on those front lines with helping your operational team set up and break down any event, because it's whatever the call is. And we're there to support that. And from a, continuing a little bit on about the employee perspective, Phil, with Stockton, what else do you see? What else is critical to telling your employees about this environment that we're moving into?
Well, from a Stockton perspective, our environment is our students, really. That, I mean, I never thought that I would be teaching online over Zoom. I went back to teaching later after an industry career, and what I really enjoyed was being in the classroom and having those personal interactions. I probably wouldn't be doing this if I knew I had to do it over Zoom or otherwise. Well, our students are, they want a college experience. Being a freshman, I don't know, some of you were probably parents of college-age kids on the panel. And, being a freshman and having your first semester sitting home in your bedroom being on Zoom is not, it's not the norm. So we have to communicate with those students to keep them engaged. We know this is not a permanent situation, but if you asked me at the start of this spring semester in January, if I could guarantee those kids they would be back in September, how could I do that? So we're hopeful. We think we will be. In fact, I'm sure we will be, but I mean, barring some unforeseen thing. But in January, what could you say? So we're constantly communicating with the students, trying to, not overpromise, but not be naysayers either. Now, when they do come back, what's the classroom going to be like? We are waiting for state guidelines. We will comply with state guidelines. We want everybody to be safe. We certainly, as a public institution, will abide by all of those, and probably more strictly than many would. But what is that classroom going to look like? Those desks that were elbow to elbow. We can't bust out walls and make the classrooms bigger. We've got what we've got. So what is that going to look like? And I'm asked that question every day. And, so as far as communicating, we want to be positive. We believe that it's going to be a great semester coming up. So that's the Stockton perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about students, because they want, it's a different experience for a freshman going away to college and living in a dorm, for sure, and getting used to that environment.
I mean, didn't we all look forward to that? Wasn't that like one of the coolest things? Was like, all right, I'm out of here.
I was nervous for about a week.
Right. We were nervous for about a week, and that was it. And then, the social life stuff kicked in. I don't know about you guys, but, I had a fine social experience in college. Not so fine that it ruined my career, but I had a good time.
Phil, you were hedging there a little bit. You said you had a fine experience. I knew you were going to give us a little bit more detail on your college experience there.
I had the full experience.
That's tremendous. Now, Dave, you welcome your employees back. What does that ramp up look like? And how, I'm guessing they're excited to be back too, to welcoming their guests back.
They are. And I think Phil said some really thoughtful things there. So much of what we've learned in the past year is about adaptability. I mean, last February, 2 Februarys ago, I was at a Kane Brown concert at Boardwalk Hall. And a year later, our entire industry had been turned on its head. So I went from drinking a beer at the third song to trying to figure out how we were going to march forward a year later. So much of of what we've tried to do with our employees is share with them how we're creating a safe experience and then embodying it in our actions. We're fortunate to have a fantastic partner at the Wells Fargo Center in Comcast Spectacor, and the investments that they have made, whether it be the $11 million filtration system that cycles new air in every 30 minutes, or the beefed up clean teams that they have sanitizing the facility. I think you have to show your employees first what you're doing to keep things safe, because they're your true ambassadors. And I think sometimes because of the hustle and bustle of our industry, because of how fast paced our world has become with the consumption of information, we forget that our greatest ambassadors are actually the people on our front lines every day, our employees. So much of our efforts have been educating them on how we've made it safe, so that when they're talking to season ticket members and clients and partners and whomever comes through the doors, that we're super aligned. I also think, Michael, it articulates the power of really good brands working together to convey a message. This situation with the pandemic cannot be tackled solely by Stockton or the 76ers or anything. We have to work together and as an industry and convey the safety standards that are going to march us forward. And I think that's really been the key for us, is showing our employees that, you know, we're talking the talk, but we're walking it too.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And Bill, with your volunteers, I would imagine that's the same. That's what we're going through now as we plan the air show, you know, making sure our volunteers communicate, because typically our volunteers for the air show are a little older.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, we were able to hold the ShopRite LPGA Classic last fall, and there were no spectators, but we still needed volunteers. You know, you need walking scores. You need to shuttle the players from different locations. We still probably needed about 200, 250 volunteers. And that was kind of in the height still of when last September. I mean, things are much kind of better now, but, you know, I didn't really know if we were going to be able to get 200 or 250 volunteers to come and do this. It's an outdoor event, so I think that helped. But we definitely, you know, we needed to lead by example, and show the volunteers that we were taking this serious, and that the LPGA had overall guidelines, regardless of the state. You know, the LPGA moves around from state to state to state, and some are more lax, some are stricter, but the LPGA had their own set guidelines that might have been stricter than any state around. So we were showing them that, hey, this is what the LPGA is doing and what we're doing and what Seaview is doing, and everybody was wearing masks, and I think it definitely, and it needed to come from the top. You know, if I rode around, or if I was always around, I didn't have a mask on, well, then volunteers might be like, well, they're asking us and they're not doing it. So I made sure my staff, I said, guys, we have to set this example for all the volunteers to follow and everybody else around if we're asking this to be done. And it worked great. And there was also testing involved. You know, there were certain, and the volunteers saw that, hey, if I'm near a player, if I'm a walking score, if I'm in close proximity to a player, I got tested. We were getting temperature checked. They saw that those things were actually taking place. So it went smooth, and I think everyone had a great experience and saw that we were taking it serious.
That's great. And it's so important, like everybody has said, they're your frontline people. They're engaging with your customers, your sponsors, everybody, you know, all the time. And if that communication everybody isn't on the same page and saying the same thing, it creates a challenge. And we understand that some people in these environments are still a little hesitant to come back to it. I mean, we're certainly seeing it now with the amount of unemployment there is. So, you know, creating these events and what you're doing now sets the tone even for other business communities and how we're welcoming employees back to our office spaces. You know, now this week, good enough, you know, for us that Governor Murphy started expanding some capacities with certain events, and he opened capacities on events that were typically considered higher risk. Weddings, dancing, proms, with the spread of the events. That's a good thing that we're seeing more confidence there as vaccination rates go up, and we're starting to see the other key metrics related to the pandemic go down. You know, how do you think the communication, Phil, and I'll start with you with this one, you know, is going to lag because of these perceived as sporadic openings of events where, you know, we talked earlier before we hopped on the call with everybody, a meeting is only 25 people, but a wedding can be 250 people indoors now. Do you think that creates confusion and really challenges perception versus reality.
Well, confusion among who? The public and, I
Yeah.
mean, the general public?
Well, you think, if you have an employee that's coming to work and they're hearing that some events are higher risk and they're opening up, but maybe a meeting, which is lower risk, where you can social distance, you can keep everybody apart, is a safer environment, but some higher risk events are coming. And then you have the general public that is interested in attending these events. And there's inconsistencies with some of the current regulations. Does that create confusion? And as we try and convey messages of safety and health and protocol, how long could that communication lag before your customers feel safe?
Well, that's actually a complicated question. The communication of it can either lead or lag the reality. The reality of it is that we have different regulations for different activities. I mean, that's fact. As we spoke about before, in a wedding or that kind of event, that's allowed. A business meeting isn't allowed with the same number of people. Without debating the actual merits of that, just talking about the communication, employees are going to have their own points of view on it. They're going to be confused. Business owners are going to have different opinions on it, depending on whether it's good for their business or bad for their business. And the general public, I don't know how they're going to feel about it. They could be confused. They might not be. But I do know this, and it's not really an aside. We did a survey in the middle of the winter amongst people that have visited Atlantic City. And it was not just casinos, it was everything. Restaurants, such that they were open with the limited capacity. The casinos, walking on the boardwalk, shopping. And what we found were that the people that actually came here felt pretty safe. That, and this is published on our Stockton website, in Light. If anybody's actually interested in the Levinson Institute under research, and I'm sure that Sarah would be happy to provide the link. She hasn't already done so. The survey said that during these individual activities that the respondents who did them felt safe, felt that the operators were following the protocols. So that's a little bit of reality. Does that message get out there? How do you even say that? We're following the protocols. Okay, that's expected, right? But they really are. And I think the fact that almost 80% of the visitors rated their trip during this post-pandemic period as either, very satisfying or extremely satisfying. That's wonderful. So I think maybe making sure that we lead with good news, because there is good news, will help. The inconsistencies, if you will, amongst application, I don't think we can do anything about that from a communication standpoint, other than just keep talking about the positives. As the month of May rolls out, more people are getting vaccinated, the rates are going down. The governor has indicated that there will be additional, announcements about restrictions. There's not a lot we can talk about till we know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah, no question about it. And I think Ronnie and I have spent a lot of time talking about this. It's all about moving forward. It's all about what's next and then how we can move forward through this pandemic. The virus isn't going away, anytime soon. Vaccinations are increasing. Key metrics related to it are decreasing, which is great. So we're getting in a good position. Now Ronnie, part of our business recovery and winning back clients and generating new demand and kind of cementing consumer confidence, because that's what this is about. It's your employee and consumer confidence. How important is the marketing to the success of the event industry, because once that live event industry gets going, the economic trickle down effect of that to your restaurants, to your retail, to everything is enormous.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Mike. I just wanted to jump back to the other question, if I may, for a second, because I think it's important, because of the audience that we have, is that we make sure that there's clear communication going out there. The announcement that the governor made talked about the indoor capacity increasing to 50%. There were 4 bullet points as part of that. It said 250 people maximum. The second bullet point said proms, weddings, and funerals. The third bullet point said performances. And the fourth bullet point said events. So our interpretation at the Atlantic City Convention Center is 250 people, not 25. And so as we're moving forward, that is the numbers that we are working on. And just for context, I just want to share a little bit about how we go about, attracting the business. And so Spectra, which I'm an employee of, is the management company of the Atlantic City Convention Center. We partner with Meet AC in this process. We work on behalf of the CRDA that funds us to be able to do what we do and specialize in driving demand to the convention center. So we are in daily and in constant communication with Meet AC, the CRDA, and our team at Spectra, just to make sure that when these announcements come out, these executive orders come out, that we are clear in terms of what we need to do and how we need to get this information out to our customers so that there is no confusion. And communication, as we all know in business, is probably the most critical of making sure that there's the right communication going out at the right time so everyone can be marching in the same cadence. So I just want to speak to that. And then Mike, your question was about marketing. Is that what you
Yeah, a lot of our efforts and a lot of what we started this conversation with has really been about messaging and making sure everybody has that. But to building on what we discussed earlier about cementing that consumer confidence, the marketing that goes out, to the success of the business, is how important is that, the consistency and the messaging and how it evolves.
Right. Marketing has always been important in business. In fact, that's what my degree is in marketing. I think today, everything has changed based on the pandemic and what we've all experienced in business in the last year. I would say marketing at this point is critical. It is critical to rebuilding the demand. It's critical to introducing your product, your brand, your service to not only your existing customers, but new customers. And I think the most important thing as we look at marketing is it has to be a sustainable and it has to be a consistent message. So when we talk about marketing and cementing consumer confidence and rebuilding demand back, I think there's a real opportunity in Atlantic City to create a unified marketing message, to create alignment. And I think Dave said it, is that, look, this is not going to be solved by the Sixers, not going to be solved by Stockton, it's not going to be solved by Spectra. It is going to be unity. And as we look at the destination, it's going to be how all the assets in Atlantic City are communicating the same message so that we can invite that customer back to experience the uniqueness of this destination. And the good thing is, as Dave mentioned, is that the business has been turned on its head. So everyone has been reset to the starting line. It's going to be how fast you get out the starting line, how many customers you can touch and communicate with, is who's going to get the advantage.
Sorry, I was just closing a couple windows there. Now, Dave and Bill, let's start with you, Dave. We talked a little bit more about communicating and the marketing message. How does that impact your budget for an event? Your marketing budget for the event. Now, I'm planning the air show right now, but I'm looking at spending significant dollars on additional signage, radio spots, the PSAs on the monitors on the boardwalk to encourage it. So your marketing campaign changes significantly, but how much does that change and how much does that impact your budget?
It's a great question. I think a bulk, especially in the business of sports, of our marketing is digital centric. We spend so much of our time focused on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat and all these new mediums that are popping up. I hope you don't mind me taking a slight left turn on this answer though, because one of the pieces that I think is still incredibly valuable as you think about your budgeting campaign is the dollars you're going to allocate towards going out and generating earned media. I cheated a little bit and I looked at some of the participants on the call. And one that comes to mind is many of our friends, Scott Cronick. If you think about Scott Cronick from the Press of AC and all the work that he's done, he has established himself over the last decade plus as one of the trusted voices in our area. So how are we not just as businesses communicating our message? How are we pitching and telling stories to our local media, to our local spokesmen to help us convey the message? We still very much in this society need and should place a value on generating earned media. So I think if I look at the buckets, Michael, I think you need to spend a portion of your budget on traditional media. I think you need to amplify the amount you're spending in the digital space. And I still think there's tremendous value in connecting with media, connecting with the folks who are driving the message in newspapers, radio, TV, digital, whatever it may be. There are so many trusted voices in our city and in our Atlanta County area. As many of you know, I spent 8 years in Las Vegas running communications and marketing for the Ultimate Fighting Championship. And I can't tell you in my travels all around the world how many times I would have a conversation about Atlantic City and how many misconceptions there were about our city based on what they saw on some sort of documentary or whatever it may be. The power of Atlantic City to me is demonstrated in how we've rallied through economic crisis, through pandemics. When I was a Stockton student, I can tell you it did not look anything like the university that Phil calls home today. So the ability to rally, the ability to demonstrate strength of our market, and as Ronnie, I thought really smartly said, like, how do we find ways to market our message together? I think it's traditional media, the convergence of digital media, and do not forget the importance of earned media in the society today.
I think Dave's spot on with that. And as you can imagine, the marketing space is going to be crowded. So bundling different assets together to get that message out there as frequently as you can, as loud as you can, I think is going to it's going to be a differentiator.
Yeah, Michael, I'm going to jump in. Jennifer on the chat actually just had a fantastic point, which was about non-traditional media. You know, this little thing right here has changed how we consume news. You know, we have literally on our Twitter feeds selected what we want to follow, selected what type of news. And, you know, I happen to love fishing. There are certain things that I follow in South Jersey, so I know the fishing report. I may not get that in the Wall Street Journal. My wife, for example, loves to know what type of local events are coming around, whether it be festivals or pumpkin patches or whatever. You may not get that in the pages of the Philadelphia Inquirer. So she pointed out Jersey Family Fun and other hyper local websites. That's a fantastic call. And it just shows you how deep we need to dig as communications and marketing professionals to make sure we're connecting with where our fans and our consumers are.
No, that's tremendous. And you look at all of the platforms and how we choose what mediums we get information from. You mentioned all the social media platforms. You mentioned print publications, you know, your Press of Atlantic City, AC Weekly, NJ.com. You know, there are so many media outlets that we have to utilize in order to convey this message. It's critical to what we all do. For a variety of different reasons. And Bill, with the LPGA and traveling around, you know, your audience, predominantly female audience?
That actually attends? No, I wouldn't say. Wow. I think it's probably, I mean, it's families and it's golf fans. So it probably is actually 60-40, maybe split male, female. So, you know, we have found that it's, hey, we need to showcase that this is a family event. you're always going to have your hardcore golf fan who like wants to come out and watch golf. And I think one thing that have been trying to do over the years is, you know, our event is largely free. You know, if you have a ShopRite Price Plus card, you can just get a grounds ticket for free. So it's generally, you know, anybody can come. And we just want to try and point out that, you know, even if you're not a golf fan or it may be family or whatever, come out and like, who doesn't want to walk around outside on a beautiful day and watch the best golfers in the world hit shots? And I think we have a lot of fans, once they finally do that, they come back all the time. They're like, that was amazing. Like that was just got a drink and walked around and it was a beautiful day. So, you know, I think that those are kind of the fans we're going after and just to make it a family fun, free event. But I would say in the communications, you know, what we need to make sure, and we'll probably hit, you know, every outlet that we've always already been doing, and maybe we'll increase a little bit, but maybe we'll keep it at the same levels. But we just need to focus on that. Hey, you can come to this event. It's happening. Like, I just think our billboard last year was like on the AC Expressway was like, watch on the Golf Channel. Like, it was clear, like this is happening, but like tune in and watch on the Golf Channel. And now it needs to be, you know, we're just talking about some ideas of just like, see you there, like simple, like we are open, come on out. It's free for your family and just make sure that people know, you know, the last thing we want is someone like, oh, I don't think they're having it, or it's limited fans, or I probably can't go. It's like, you know, end of September, if we're fully on and good to go, we want that message to be out there of like, hey, everyone can come. So that's our most important messaging, is that there's no mix there. And last year, there was also part of a mix of like, we need to make sure that people know that this is closed. Like, you can't just show up and get turned away. So, you know, totally different, but we need to make sure that the message is clear, that we're open. So,
Bill, if
Yeah.
I can, I'm sorry, Michael, if I can
No,
build
go ahead,
off,
Dave.
if I could build off of Bill's point there, I think this is an awesome opportunity to reset. You know, if we look for silver linings, Bill's story that he just shared reminded me a lot of the UFC, which was, let's get people to come to our events and experience why they're awesome. Because you may not be a traditional golf fan. You may not. But when you get a chance to walk 18 at a big course in a big tournament, you feel the energy, you feel the intensity of the athletes, you see the activations from the partnership. I think NASCAR is another fantastic sport that has had to reimagine the experience prior to the pandemic. I think as we come out of the pandemic, we need to get people back experiencing why they loved our events in the first place. And I think it opens up a door for us to get folks interested in trying new things. How many of us have sat at home this last year and said, damn, there's a long list of things I want to do when I get out of here. And there are things I keep putting off. It's my bucket list. No, as soon as I can, my bucket list is getting accelerated. And I think we as marketers and comms professionals and leaders, we should capitalize on that enthusiasm.
yeah. And one thing I'll add that I want to say is like, we need to get the message out, but I actually think once we get that message out that it's open, I think the pent up demand for people who missed the ShopRite LPGA Classic last year, like the demand is going to be there as long as they know. I mean, there are people who are just have gone for 25 years. And I mean, I think we're going to have really big crowds once they know we're back and, hey, there's no limit for outdoor fans walking the course. I think people are going to come. I mean, they really want to see this, and there's been pent up demand for a lot of activity. So I think we're going to have fantastic crowds this year.
Hey, Mike, just a comment on that. And I think, Dave, you said it when we were kind of talking before we jumped into the live webinar, is that creating powerful moments and special experiences is the business that we're in. And Dave gave an example about the UFC. I'm going to give you an example that I've had the opportunity to experience in my career, and it speaks to the power of live events. I've had the opportunity to attend the Indy 500, and I'm not a race car fan. First experience, it was an amazing experience. The energy of the crowd, the sound of the race cars coming around the track and watching them pass you at 190, 200 miles an hour was like, wow, you know, it's an amazing experience. So it's an opportunity of the business that we're in when we start bringing back these customers into our facilities, it's the experience, it's the energy that you're going to create that's going to create that return customer. And that's the power of the live events. And I go back to the comment is it's what we do, and we have to be flawless in creating those powerful moments and special experiences.
Couldn't have said it better. And the example you used with NASCAR is great, because I was going to bring up the air show. You know, there is nothing like those Thunderbirds when they buzz Boardwalk Hall and fly over the beach a couple 100 feet off the ground and fly out over the ocean, and you turn around and just watch the crowd's reaction. You know, the reaction, I'm getting more phone calls now and emails now about this event than I have in the 3 years of running this. It is just unbelievable, the demand. And I think part of it is because it's outdoors and it's on the beach, but part of it is that pent up demand. People want to get back and experience that type of environment. They want to be around other people and hear that roar, whether it's of a car or a jet or of the crowd that's around them. They want that experience. So I completely agree with all of you.
Yeah.
That demand is there.
And Michael, what I'll say is, I think what people have found out, maybe who have gone to the air show for 8 years in a row, is they realize how much they missed it. You know, when it's every year and you just go and you don't think, should we go this year? I don't know. We're busy. Let's go. And then you it's taken away and you can't go, and you realize, and that's why people are reaching out. Like, is it going to happen? Like, oh, I can't believe how much I miss this event. And I think people for the LPGA might be like, wow, I really missed going to that event, and they're going to come. So at least that's one thing that I think is taking place.
Yeah, absolutely is. Absolutely is. I mean, the volume of calls and website clicks we're getting is just incredible. Now, you know, with any event, we all have to generate revenue for the event. We're talking about communication. You're talking about generating revenue. So you have marketing, which drives sales, right? Your sales drive revenue to help put on the event. And then you have the service that creates repeat customers coming back. And that's what we're talking about, is bringing all these people back. You know, Phil, from a marketing perspective and what you do and teach, do you feel that any one of those three elements is more important than the other?
Well, you need all three. If you don't do any marketing to make people aware, they're not going to come or buy or whatever the situation. If you can't, quote, get them in the store and then execute the sale, you've got no revenue. But you need all three, and you need the communication. So you need, from a teaching standpoint, I don't prioritize one over the other. All three are absolutely critical to every business. If I bring you here and you have a bad experience, you're not going to come back. Profits usually, in most, at least manufacturing companies and service providers, profits come from repeat business. You're usually spending a lot of money to generate an initial customer, a trial, if you will. That's usually not a profitable transaction. You make your money off repeat. Well, you don't get repeat if you bring people in for a bad experience.
I think Phil's on to something there. And when the 76ers were going through the trying years, the process years, if you will, one of the challenges is the team fell to one of the least attended teams in the NBA. We understood that we had a long-term vision. We had a long-term plan, and it's coming to fruition today in 2021, but there were some lean years. And I give a lot of credit to our managing partners, Josh Harris and David Blitzer, and then our CEO and president, Scott O'Neill and Chris Heck. We prioritize service. And to go back to what Ronnie said, we prioritize the experience. And so much of it was being honest with our fans to create repeat customers, that we had a plan, that we had a vision, and we needed them to get in early on that vision and plan. And it allowed us to prioritize the in-arena experience. It allowed us to prioritize the touch point they had with their season ticket rep or whomever their counterpart was with the organization. We all compete for a limited share of someone's time nowadays. I mean, if we all think and reflect on our own lives, we have so much limited time, maybe not so much in the pandemic, but in normal years, whether it be taking your kids to soccer games or the demands of your job or whatever it may be. How do you create that connection point? I would put a priority on service, number one. It's hard, as Phil said, to rank those things, but there are a lot of choices in the marketplace. If you don't want to go to the air show, you can go to a country festival. If you don't want to go to a country festival, you can go to a concert, whatever it may be. And with Bill's business, I think he's done a remarkable job making the ShopRite event a staple of our community. Think about how hard that is to actually do, to gain that consistency. So doubling back to what Phil said, you do have to figure out your ways to create that repeat customer. And I think it starts with that touch point of service. It's so important, especially in our industry. We are a hospitality and tourism driven industry. If you have a bad experience, it stays with you. My wife and I, pandemic permitting, just booked a vacation. And I can't begin to tell you how many websites she looked at, vetting the resort we're going to, not looking for great experiences, looking for bad experiences, looking for people who are sharing what the downside is. It just makes service so much more of a priority.
Yeah, I know.
Yep, I'll add just one thing I would say to that is once we get people out to the ShopRite LPGA Classic, if they have a good time, one of our best marketers is just that they go back to their neighborhood and their friends and they're like, you guys got to come to this next year. It's a free event. It's so much fun. We'll pick the best day. The kids can come, all that stuff. And then it grows there. Whereas if they have a bad experience, they're going to go back to the same people and be like, man, how you finally went to the LPGA? How was it? Like, it wasn't that good. The lines were long and blah, 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 and then those people then aren't going to go where, so you need to drive service because it's just word of mouth, just like the hotel, reviews, it spreads. And, it's so important for our business.
You absolutely have, I'm sorry for jumping in, but you absolutely have to deliver the goods. I mean, everybody's nodding their head and we're in different businesses and it's just an absolute requirement, whether it's a product that has to be manufactured consistently within tight specifications, whether it's a entertainment activity that, the lines can't be too long. People have to feel every part of that experience met their expectations or exceeded it. That's not going to change when we come back fully open.
I couldn't agree more than what everyone said. They're all important. I give a little bit of different take on it and then put a bow on it, is that they're all important. I think they're all important in terms of where they are in the cycle channel. But when you think about the experience, I would say tends to have a little bit more of heightened focus because of the environment we live in terms of the authentic experience. People are looking for the review from another consumer. They put a lot of weight in terms of what the consumer says. And if you pay attention to the commercials that we're seeing now, is people are getting back to authenticity. It's someone that is in the space telling the story about their experience, or it's a personal invitation. And so I think that when we look at our hospitality business and customer experiences, service, and Dave made a point, is if you have a bad experience, doesn't matter how much marketing dollars you spent, doesn't matter what your sales revenue is, bad experience, that can turn things south real fast just by word of mouth and the consumer making the decision not to go back. There's too many choices out there.
Yeah, and I'll add one thing. I was just thinking about, which they're all vitally important. I think it differs based on your event. We've been in the market for 30 years. People know the ShopRite LPGA Classic, so we need to drive home the service. If we were a brand new LPGA event for the first year trying to come into this marketplace, we would clearly have to hit the marketing and sales harder than we do having been here 30 years. Not that we don't, but there is a difference depending on, what your event is, how aged it is, how long it's been in the marketplace, and how familiar people are with it. So all important, but there is, it depends on just, case by case, I would think a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Being a new event versus something that's existing changes a lot of things in any market that you're doing it. So let's talk a little bit about going forward. We got a couple minutes left here and some long-term impacts. We have a couple questions in the Q&A, and one of them is related to vaccination cards. And this has been a hot topic, very politicized topic. You know, we have some colleges and universities in New Jersey that are saying they're requiring their students coming back. I don't know if any arenas or venues across the country are actually requiring it. I know it's part of the conversation, but what are you hearing, and kind of what are some of your opinions on that vaccination card? What are you hearing across your industries? Ronnie, what it was with Spectrum, with facilities and buildings all over the world? Are you any conversations about that?
Well, let me say this. There is a lot of conversations that are happening regarding that topic. Nothing has been mandated from a company standpoint. I think that I am seeing, just kind of in paying attention to the business, there's a lot of different things happening right now. In fact, I saw recently that a stadium is going to create a whole section for vaccinated fans. And so I think that as we move forward, it's something that will be, I'm sure, topic of discussions. I think brands and facilities and arenas got to do what they think is best for their business. I also think it's going to be geographic or jurisdictional related, depending on what's the environment in the area where the arena or facility is. But as you talk about colleges and universities, I think as we move closer to the start of a new college semester coming into August, I think that you're going to see more and more colleges and universities mandate vaccinations for students that want to come back and live on campus. I think we're already starting to see the trend in some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Dave, anything across the NBA? I know each state's a little bit different in how they implement anything. Have you heard anything about vaccination cards or vaccination sections?
Not as much on cards. I don't think that is a trend that we're pursuing too heavily. We have had a lot of conversations with local elected officials about vaccinated sections. And I think some of the perception in the public is it's applying some sort of pressure to people who don't feel comfortable getting vaccines. It's actually the opposite. It's trying to figure out how we can get more fans into our building to enjoy events. And if folks are vaccinated and they're comfortable, we can put them together. The CDC is sharing more and more information every day about the safety elements and how the transmission works and things like that. So this is a really tricky time in our world and our industry. A lot of these conversations have, I guess, understandably become politicized and become, double-edged swords in a lot of conversations, depending on how you consume your news. What we want to do, and one of the panelists said, I believe it was Phil, we do want to stay aligned wherever possible with the advice of people smarter than us on things such as the pandemic. We are in the business of sports and entertainment. We have very, very talented people, but we're not specialists in pandemics. So we are trying to get as much information and be smart about this as possible. We have a responsibility to keep our fans safe. We have a responsibility to keep our players safe and our staff safe. We are broaching the conversation of what vaccinated sections would look like. We also own the New Jersey Devils up in Newark, so we've had conversations in Jersey as well as Pennsylvania and in the city of Philadelphia. So conversations are ongoing. The key takeaway I have is that we're all trying to find creative solutions to kickstart this industry again. And there's not always the perfect answer. But as we're on this call, I got an update from our head of government relations, and I'm looking around other states or other parts of our state in Philadelphia and in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, excuse me. It's happening. The industry is starting to open up again, and it's going to force us all to make sure our messaging is really tight and make sure that we are adhering to the guidance that we can and try to push this thing forward. But to answer your question, we haven't had in-depth conversations about whether or not someone's going to have to be validated with a card. When we're thinking about how can we take advantage of this incredible opportunity that vaccination numbers are up, and how can we use that to our advantage to get more fans who want to be in our buildings back?
Yeah, I think
I'll point out one thing just about vaccinations. Like I said, I was just down at the Chubb Classic, and while the fans, there was nothing to do with fans and vaccinations and testing and anything like that, walking around outdoors. The players are still in this phase where they have to test before they can participate, and they have to, pass their COVID test, get negative, and then they can play. But this was the first event I saw. If you showed a vaccination card, you didn't have to test. And I can see a lot of maybe players who, maybe were hesitant, but now they see all their friends are like, wait, you don't have to go to testing and do this Q-tip and all that stuff. You never even have to do, you uploaded your vaccination card, and for the next 10 events, you don't have to test. And I think some people might be like, wow, all right, maybe I'll do that. Like, it just seems a lot easier, and it might drive vaccinations that way. That was the first event I saw where, wow, that's a lot easier than having to go to this parking lot and test and wait for the result and all this stuff. And, I almost equate it to like Easy Pass. Like the first time maybe it came back, you're like, I'm not going to get that. They can track my speed or whatever. And the first couple of times you sit and wait in a long line, you're like, wait a second. Those people are not waiting and flying through. Like, I don't know. I could just see where if there's full sections, hey, we got to be 3 seats apart, but they're all in a full section partying. Like maybe I should, or maybe I should get Easy Pass. So I don't know. That was just I just saw that recently down at this event.
No, Bill, that's a really, really good point. My first answer was really geared towards the fan experience. But when we talk about our athletes, I think the NBA has done a remarkable job with the protocols and keeping everybody safe. Yesterday, out of 438 tests for players, we had 2 positives. And that's on the high side for where our trends have been. So the virus is still here. We recognize that. But the vaccination has allowed the NBA and the Players Association to take a look at how they can ease some of those stringent testing protocols. There was a point in this season where I felt like I was getting tested multiple times a day, and it was all for the safety of the sport and the fans and everyone. But to your point, it does give people incentive to take part in that process and get back to what they're used to doing. I know for our players, we've been fortunate to have some really cool partnerships with Cooper Hospital. We have another partnership coming up with Walmart through the NBA. Our players have become a powerful voice in echoing the benefits of getting vaccinated. And I'm sure in Ronnie's business with, concert performers and big shows and whatnot, even in Phil's world in education, like the more universities that can get behind this type of thing, I think it'll push us forward. And we're always going to have a carve out that understanding not everyone's going to want to get vaccinated. I don't think we can ostracize those folks. We need to figure out how to make this as safe as possible for as many people as possible. I think that's the guiding light.
You're right on. I think it's time. You think about it, it's been 14 months almost since this pandemic happened, and look how far we've come during that time and how much we've learned, how much we've pivoted and evolved and kind of changed the way we've operated on a daily basis. And I think that's going to continue, but I think it's going to continue in a positive direction. We're going to continue to move. The desire's there. We figured out better ways to communicate with each other. We figured out how to operate events in a safe and responsible manner. And I think that, collectively, with all of us doing that, all of us pulling in the same direction, it's going to build upon each other. That's where we lean on each other, as you've said earlier, as event planners and leaders in the community is really, really important. And, we're up against time. I'm going to see, there was one other question somebody had about the role of technology playing in maintaining safety protocols and restoring confidence to employees and consumers alike. So I don't know what they mean if it's the temperature checks, I think the NBA used this, Dave. I know the NFL did, were the wrist trackers for people when they were in Orlando to gauge who was in 6 feet. I've talked about that with the administration for convention business. Our events, we know who's in the building. We know who's there. So I don't know if anybody has had any discussions about, the application of technology as we move forward through events, if any of that's going to be implemented or continue to be implemented.
Yeah, I'll start with what you saw in the bubble, if you will, in Orlando last season. We did leverage different technology with the support of the players and the Players Association. And it was largely, especially in our world today, like I think there's a misconception that when we leverage these forms of technology, we're doing it to, enact some sort of tracking of everyone's movements. The reality is everything that we've done in our sports and entertainment business is just to try to keep people safe. We want to see this thing through and get through the end of it. And it's one of my favorite parts about working for this company. Innovation, that word innovation, it's becoming a buzzword in our industry, but it's a part of our core values. So any chance we can leverage technology for health and safety, for maximization of profit, for helping our athletes perform on and off the court, whatever it may be, I think you have to kind of lean into that stuff. But this year, we have been working really closely with the Players Association and the NBA to try to find ways to get our sport back in full capacity. But in the bubble, it was a fantastic example of using some of those wristbands to try to remind people of everything from social distancing to technology we had set up to make sure people remembered to go get tested. It's those little touch points that in the end add up to getting ourselves, back in full arenas again and back to the business we're used to doing.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, I think that I think Dave touched on some really important things as it relates to the live event business. Technology, we live in a technological society. And I think that technology will continue to be important as we move forward. There's a lot of different forms of technology. It can be expensive, and it's going to be hard for all businesses to jump in on the technology. But from a convention center and arena standpoint, right now what's important is for us to be able to measure attendance and capacity numbers inside of a space. And so we are and have been testing people counters, similar to the way you walk in a store and you know exactly how many people are in that room. Somebody exits, the number goes down. So we're looking at all of those types of things. We have enhanced our temperature checks at the entry of the building where you can get your wrist scanned and it takes temperature. So to the question, I think that technology will continue to be important. I think it would be tough to put technology mandates on businesses because the point of entry will be too expensive for some.
All great points. And we're at 10 o'clock now. I want to thank everybody for attending and leave you with an opportunity. If you want to make any closing comments before we scoot, I can't thank you all for participating so much today. I greatly, greatly appreciate your time. Certainly look forward to getting back to some of these events. If anybody wants to volunteer for the air show, I'll take it. But I want to open the floor to anyone that has any closing comments or anything you want to say before we get out of here.
I'll go ahead, Michael. I think, first of all, thank you guys. This is for all of us who are, so busy trying to get this industry started again, to connect with the folks that are on this type of event. It's really important. It's critical to us, idea sharing. And again, I know I've said this ad nauseum on this call, but like pushing this thing forward. So to Bill and Phil and Ronnie and Sarah, Jane and Michael, this has been awesome. And we clinched our 4th straight playoff berth yesterday. So hopefully I'll be seeing you all inside the confines of the Wells Fargo Center in the coming months.
So Mike, I'll just kind of wrap up with a thought, and I'll use kind of a sports analogy here, is that, as it relates to the convention, meetings, live entertainment events, sports, business, industry, we're all on the same team. And the way I look at it is, as teammates all on the same team, we have to make sure that we are, running our playing as hard as we can play for the good of the team. And I think that if we're doing that, we have to look at how we can collectively win more opportunities, win more approvals, win more clients. And I think that collectively, just as a reminder, we're all on the same team. And when I look at this, it's in this topic, it's for Atlantic City, it's for all of those different sectors. And so let's just play to win for the destination.
I'll just end, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Stockton, and everybody else on the panel here, and also everybody who joined us. Thank you for your time. And I'll just end September 27th to October 3rd, the ShopRite LPGA Classic will be back, and we will have fans outside. So come on and enjoy the nice weather, the fall weather, and walk around and see the best lady golfers and professional golfers in the world tee it up. It'll be fun.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Sarah, Jane, as always, you guys are terrific. And then Sarah, I didn't know if you wanted to close on anything, but I just wanted to thank all the attendees and our participants today. You guys were great. It's good to share our experiences with members. We're recording this. We're going to share it so they understand some of the complexities and some of the solutions that we're working on as we move through this pandemic together to get people back together. I think it's so important. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your experiences with us tonight.
And I want to echo Michael by thanking all of our panelists for sharing your amazing insight into what's going on in what is an ever-changing environment, and definitely opportunity for innovation and adaptation, and only, I think, exciting things to come. I think Michael has an exit survey that he'd like to share with the attendees. I thank you again all for attending this event. We love to hear back from you guys about these events and how we can really bring this information to you. So I do encourage you to respond to the exit survey. Let us know how we're doing and how we can best serve you with our content. As Michael also said, we will be making the recording available. We'll be posting that, I believe, both to the Chamber and Lights sites. So please keep an eye on our event pages for that information when it becomes available. All right, so on that note, thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful, happy, healthy day, week, month, year, and we'll see you here again soon.
Thank you, Sarah. This has been great. Go Sixers!
This event is presented by the Lloyd D. Levinson Institute of Gaming, Hospitality, and Tourism, School of Business, Stockton University, in partnership with the Greater Atlantic City Chamber.